Hey there, Rooted Facilitators. This is Eric Marvin, your Associate Campus Pastor for Life Groups. Hey guys, congratulations on kicking Rooted off super well. I enjoyed the launch ceremony up at the Mesa campus. That was fantastic. My personal feeling as I sat there in the room was just God was moving and some really cool things were happening. And I looked over you guys and I saw all your groups there and all your people, and I saw you guys talking and sharing and laughing. And to me, that was just a super encouraging thing to see. So thank you for being willing to do that. Thank you for being open and for helping create that environment that allowed people to really feel comfortable and to get to know you as a facilitator, but also the other people in the group. So great job, great launch this past Wednesday at the Mesa campus. I was just absolutely thrilled. And just to see the whole room, I mean, just to see everyone there was really, really awesome. So, well, hey, listen, like I said to most of you before, I think I caught all of you at the launch. We are not going to have a just-in-time training meeting this Sunday because this Sunday is Mother's Day. And so I want you guys to go spend time, with your mothers, go celebrate with your family, go do whatever it is you want to do. I understand that this weekend is special. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring what I would normally bring to you in that training and in that meeting. I'm going to bring it to you through video. And so I would just ask you watch this in video in its entirety, please. And then so that you get all the information you need moving into week 2 of Rooted, which will happen here this coming Wednesday. Okay. So first off, I just want to make sure everyone knows, and we're all clear on this. We only met at Mesa this past week. Our next meeting is going to be here at the Queen Creek campus. It's going to be on Wednesday. We're going to start at 6 p.m. and we're going to go all the way till 8 p.m. I know that most of you, in fact, all of you actually don't know your room assignments yet. That is okay. I've attached your room assignments in on a document in this email that I have attached this link to this video to as well. And so go ahead and check that out. Each one of you will have your own room, so we're not going to share rooms. So we're not using the student room, we're not using the worship center, we're not even going to use the lobby. We're going to utilize 4 of the children's ministry rooms, and then we're going to also have one group in the Discover More room, which is actually where I'm standing right now. Okay, and in that document, in the email, you'll see exactly which room you will be meeting in. So what your job is as a facilitator, and you will need to do this before Wednesday, is you'll need to communicate with your group. Hopefully you've already kind of set some standards for how you will be communicating with your group this past week. And so however that is, whether it's text, email, phone calls, please communicate to your group what room they will be meeting in. Communicate a few other things to them as well. Make sure that they know that, hey, we are meeting at the Queen Creek campus, not Mesa, but Queen Creek campus on Wednesday at 6 p.m. and tell them what room that you will be in. I would even encourage you to try to get to the Queen Creek campus a little bit earlier so that you can greet them as they come in. You can receive them and you can help them find the room because some of them might be kind of new. So, okay, so that's just kind of some starting off material that you guys, if you could share that with your group through whatever communication avenue you're using, that would be great. But let's get into the material for today. It's going to be a little bit basic because the way Rooted is designed, it's designed to help you kind of ease into the material, and it's not just like you hit the ground running, but you're not necessarily in full sprint yet. So it really starts you off well with this topic of who is God? That's really the question that everyone's been doing their devotions on. At least they should have done 5 days of devotions where they're reading about and they're journaling about this question of who is God and what is he doing in this world and why are we even here? And so it's a really big kind of question, right? It's a 50,000 foot kind of question that they're going to be discussing. So that's a really great way to kind of enter into Rooted. And we're not getting so personal yet. We're kind of staying more, it's a spiritual conversation, but it's not so much a personal conversation yet. Rooted is going there, but this is a great way to start it off. So I'm really excited about that. So I'm going to show you a slide here, and it's going to seem kind of weird because normally when we do this in person, it's it makes sense, but through video, it's not going to make total sense, but I want you guys to bear with me. So whenever we meet together for these just-in-time trainings, one of the things we're going to do is we want to celebrate together always. And so one of the things I'd like you to do right now, I know normally I would just ask you guys to start shouting things out to me in person, But what were think right now, and maybe even jot some things down, because you're going to want to remember these things. What were some things that you would like to celebrate that you saw happen at the launch last Wednesday? What were some cool things? Maybe it was something that Cal said in his message. Maybe it was something that happened during the worship, something that maybe occurred while you were in your group session, while you were getting to know each other, or maybe while you were talking about confidentiality and signing that confidentiality statement. Whatever that thing is, I would ask that you write that down and remember that thing, because these are things that you want to bring up later on in Rooted that will kind of help it'll help the group remember where they came from. One of the things that is really cool about Rooted is because it is a journey. People are here at point A and we're taking them all the way to point B at the end of this thing. But if we don't remember what happened at point A, it would kind of lose track of where we came from. So think of something that you would like to celebrate. Describe that experience at the Rooted launch. What were you most excited about as you embarked on this Rooted journey? So think about those things, write it down. Maybe if we have time, we can share them in our next Just-in-Time training, which will be in person, by the way. So maybe we can share that, okay? So do that for me. Next thing is, this is kind of a longer slide, and I'm gonna walk through each one of these points real quick. But these are some of the things that you need to remember for this upcoming week of Rooted, which is, officially it's week 2 of Rooted. Which is all about who is God, asking this question. So here's some things to remember. Let's walk through each and every one of them. So what you want to do is you want to start your group off this week with a casual icebreaker. I know you did that this past week at the launch, but you really only got to spend 1 hour with the group. And our groups are a little bit larger. They're about 14 down to, I think the smallest group here is 12. But that's a big group. You only really had an hour that you got to really talk to each other. And so spend some time getting to know each other. Spend some time in an icebreaker. Something I like to do, this is just an example that I've used before in the past and it seems to work well, is I like to go around and ask people, like, where are you from? Tell me about where you grew up, your childhood home. What was that like? Or I like to ask people, what's your favorite vacation you've ever gone on? Another one that's a great one, here in Arizona, I think there's a lot of people that have moved here to Arizona, so asking them what brought you to Arizona is usually a good way to start a conversation. And then the other question you might want to consider asking, and most of you might have used this at the launch, but if you didn't, you could use this one again. But maybe even if you did use it at the launch, maybe ask this question again. What is something that you hope to gain through this Rooted experience? That's a great icebreaker that will really help people kind of get into it'll set the tone for what you're trying to do with this meeting, but it also is something that's light enough where it helps people kind of dive into discussion without there being any awkwardness, because they can kind of talk about themselves a little bit, and it's a little bit lighter, but it does really help people get into the conversation. So start the group off with a casual icebreaker. It really is super helpful to do that off the top, okay? Remember, and this is point 2, you set the tone as the facilitator. Consider sharing maybe a few personal stories. That is something that's huge. This will be, seriously guys, this week is kind of the week where you really define what this group is going to be like. You really set the pace for how your group is going to communicate with each other. It's one of those that you're kind of the thermostat, and you're setting the temperature, you're setting the dial for your group on this second week here. And so what I would ask you to do is, you don't have to do it right off the bat. It's not like you have to at the very beginning say, hey guys, I want to set the tone here and I'm going to tell you a personal story about myself. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying though is, as you go through the Rooted conversation, there will be opportunities for you to share, and use an appropriate amount of time. Remember, we're not here to be teachers, we're here to be facilitators. But there will be an appropriate amount of time where you as a facilitator could share a personal story that sets the tone for the rest of the group. It allows the rest of the group to go, oh, well, if they're being real, that means I can be real too. If they're being honest, I can be honest. And if my facilitator is being transparent, then I feel like I can be transparent as well. So remember that sets the tone for the group. Point number 3, take notes. Seriously, this is a big one. I know it seems kind of silly, it seems kind of trivial, but taking notes is a really, really big deal. And here's why. Later on in Rooted, and I'm just kind of forecasting for you right now as what is to come, But later on in Rooted, there is a time where you actually write down something we call them prophetic prayers, like what you saw God do in that person's life. And if you don't have notes to go off of, you won't remember where people started, and you won't remember everything that people have said. And so, for instance, you don't have to take like crazy specific, fill up pages worth of notes. But if someone says something along the lines of like, I had a really hard childhood growing up. My dad left. You might want to jot that down, that so-and-so had a hard childhood and they struggled because they didn't have a dad growing up. However you want to write that, but just keep it short. But you might want to write that down, because that is something that you might want to reference later on when they seem to have overcome that difficulty. Then you can look back on it and say, hey, listen, I saw you move past this obstacle that was in your way. But if you don't have that written down, you won't remember it. So take notes. When someone shares something that is valuable, that is important, make sure you write that down so that you can reference it later, okay? The fourth point, plan your prayer experience. This is huge. This is huge. You should have already kind of started this ball rolling here this past week, but seriously right now, you need to start getting down dates. You need to start getting down times, locations. You need to figure out this ASAP. The prayer experience is the first big experience that happens outside of your normal group time. Remember, week 3 is where we talk about prayer, but the prayer experience is an additional meeting time that happens somewhere other than your normal group meeting time, okay? So plan that out. Remember, it's supposed to be about 3 hours long, with corporate prayer incorporated in there, personal prayer time incorporated, and then a time for group debrief and breaking of the fast. So you want to make sure you have that all planned out. If there's any questions about the prayer experience, please shoot me a text or an email. Find me this Sunday, grab me, and ask me any questions you may have. I want to make sure you guys have the ultimate clarity on this so that you know exactly what you're doing. I also want you to know that so that you can bring your group along with that, because I want them to be clear, to know that, they need to know that, hey, we're doing a 3-hour prayer experience, but that doesn't mean that we're going to spend 3 hours by ourselves with our eyes closed. That's not what this is going to be. It's going to be guided. It's going to be interactive. There's going to be group elements to it. So you want to make sure that you plan that well, because again, that is really that's going to determine a lot of the rest of how Rooted goes. If you have a poor prayer experience, people remember that. But if you have a well-executed prayer experience, that's going to stick with people for the rest of the time they're in Rooted. So really plan that well. Okay? The fifth point here is you need to start looking for a leader of the opposite gender who would be willing to co-lead with you during week 5. Now, I know here at Queen Creek, we kind of have this taken care of, because the 3 groups, by the way, we have 5 groups. 2 of them are all female, and the other 3 are led by couples, Herndons, Breedens, and Gentrys. So I know that you guys kind of have this taken care of already, where you guys can, as a couple, you can split, and you guys can lead the guys, you gals can lead the gals. I would just suggest for you, the 2 women's groups, because of the size, I would still consider splitting up that week. And so you need to be on the lookout for who is that person that's kind of rising to the top that you would say they would be a good leader. So start looking for that person, start praying for that person, because on week 5, you're going to want to split your groups. For the 3 groups of mixed genders, you're going to split between male and female. For the 2 female groups, I would suggest you also split, just because of the size. You want to have a smaller group there to do that week 5 experience, okay? So start looking for that. And for you guys who are married, if you do want to find someone else outside of your own kind of leader, co-leader pair there, if you feel like, hey, we can do this, but we want to challenge somebody else to participate in this as well, we want to get someone else involved, start looking for that person now. Okay? Again, if you have any questions about that point, shoot me an email, a text, or find me on Sunday. I want to clarify those. All right? And then finally, let the Bible and the curriculum do the teaching. That is critical this week. And it's critical because, again, everyone is still new. Everyone's still a little nervous. People don't know each other yet. So there's going to be a temptation because of all the weeks, this is going to be the week where there's the most silence in the group. And that's just simply because people don't know yet when to talk. Now, you might, remember group dynamics, you might have some people in your group that it doesn't matter. When you ask a question, they're going to start answering right away. That's awesome. That's great. However, you might have some groups that people aren't like that, and so you might ask some questions and conversation might not immediately start. And the temptation will be for you as a facilitator to just jump in and start teaching, to put on the teaching hat and just start giving facts and information and references. And, well, this is my opinion, this is not. And again, I'm not saying that that's bad stuff, but I'm just saying, remember that your responsibility as a facilitator is to facilitate. Your responsibility here at Rooted is not to give your opinion, it's to help get the conversation going. You're creating an environment where everyone can begin to process and explore and talk and have a conversation. It's not just about you getting information into their ears. Does that make sense? Okay, so if you have any questions about that, make sure, again, you contact me on this because I really want to make sure everyone's clear on this. We want to let the Bible and the curriculum do the teaching. The great thing about this is that if they have done their homework, which they should have, after listening to Cal's message on Wednesday, they should have done their homework. So we are assuming that they have. If they've done that, they have a ton of content in their head that they are bringing to the table to discuss. So this is much different than a normal life group. People come with no background information, with no context. This is very different because people have been reading about this and journaling about this question, who is God, for 5 days. And now they're coming into a group setting where they can actually begin to process everything they have in their head. So just remember that. People have it. People have stuff to say. But for those of you that have groups that maybe are filled with people that aren't like super ready to jump in the conversation right away, you just need to let the group breathe and make sure that, hey, silence is okay. It probably means they're thinking. And you just kind of let that happen and guide the conversation. Use the curriculum as the guide. Use your facilitator guides. Those have great questions to kind of get the conversation going. And that'll be a great way to run just an awesome, successful Rooted group. Okay? So that's pretty much it for things to remember. Remember those things. I would say if I could highlight one, planning that prayer experience. That's the one to highlight. That is primary. That is key. You want to make sure you get that done. Okay? Typically what I always do in these meetings is we pray together. And so I just want to share with you the 3 things that we would normally pray for. Obviously we can't do that in person right now, but would you please join me in prayer this week for these particular things? Is that God would begin to develop deep, authentic relationships in your group. That's one of the key things we want to pray for, is that those relationships really begin to blossom into something beautiful, and that that God begins to take everyone deep fast. Because that just really helps the Rooted experience. Also pray that your discussion about God would be honoring and glorifying. I'm not saying this is an easy discussion because this is going to be hard. Like I said, it's not as personal as other discussions you're going to have in the future, but it can be a hard one. I can tell you from experience, the last round of Rooted we did in my group, this week was a week that a guy, because of a discussion we had, he said, I'm done. And now there's a lot of other context behind that there was an issue he was dealing with that had nothing to do with our group. It had nothing to do with the conversation. And that was the main reason he left. But he had a really hard time with this because he didn't really know who God was. And so this really kind of brought some stuff to the surface that he hadn't talked about in a long time. So this is a good week, good discussion. So pray that that discussion be honoring and glorifying. And then pray that people feel comfortable to share what they are really thinking. We want vulnerability. We want to model honesty. We want to be that for them, but we also are going to pray that they also, reciprocate that they give that back to us. We want that same amount of honesty and transparency coming right back at us as people begin to share. And so pray that God would do that in the hearts of our people. Okay? Guys, I love all of you. I'm praying for all of you. You're going to do a great job. Happy Mother's Day, by the way. Hug your mom. Tell your mom that you love them. I know I will. I'm so excited for what God is doing this weekend in Central as a whole, but I am really, really excited about what God is going to do in Rooted through your groups and specifically through you as a facilitator, because I know God is working through you and your obedience. Okay? Thank you guys. I love you. I'll see you around.